Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Steve Carefull. I'm a director with PA Consulting and program director for the Argenti Telehealthcare Partnership. Mark begged me not to do this, but this is Mark and I on a walk, considering what we would say this afternoon. Our aim today is to explain how we've achieved a step change in the use of technology to support transformation of social care in Hampshire. In a moment, Mark will give the commissioner perspective, and I'll give the provider perspective after that. But I'd like to start with a little audience participation, if I may. I realise that's a risk, but you look game. Could you please raise your hand if you own a smartphone? Okay, and if you've got two smartphones, raise both hands. Now keep your hands up. How many of you have got an iPad or a Samsung tablet PC, something like that in your household? Right, well that's virtually everybody, which is pretty predictable, I think, so thank you for that. So, what I'd like to do is use that as context for a couple of points that will help us sort of understand the purpose and the direction of the session that we're going to go through now. The first point is that technology is pretty ubiquitous. We all rely on it increasingly, and whether we like that idea or not, it's just become part of our lives, and there's no getting away from it. The second point, and this is an assumption, so I'm not going to ask you another question, but I think it's a fair assumption, that people don't purchase expensive technology because it contains a 4.8 gigahertz flux capacitor or because it's shiny and gunmetal grey. My experience is most people purchase technological devices because they help them to do things. They help them keep in touch with friends and relatives, follow what's going on in the world, pursue hobbies and interests, access ideas, be entertained, improve fitness, remain safe, and increasingly they help to define identity and support independence in a complex world. So I'd like you to hold those two ideas in your mind as we go through the rest of this short session. That technology is ubiquitous and it helps us to do some fundamentally important things at quite a human level. So first of all, a few headlines about the Care Technology Service in Hampshire. So in 2012-13, the year before Hampshire commissioned PA Consulting and we established the Argenti Telehealthcare Partnership, about 500 people had a council-funded telecare service. Now that's a very low number for an authority spending $400 million per annum supporting 16,000 social care clients. As of this morning, we have 6,859 service users, so we're getting there. Still some way to go though. We've sought the views of thousands of our service users, 744 in the last 6 monthly survey, and 93% of them say that telecare makes them feel safer and more secure at home. 98% of them would recommend Argenti to others. We've trained over 1,000 council and CCG staff, and each year we receive online referrals from well over 500 different social workers, OTs, dementia advisors, and community nurses. And we survey every one of those, and more than 9 out of 10 say that telecare is good or very good at achieving the outcomes they set with their client at point of referral. In that final pre-Argenti 2012-2013 year, the council spent roughly £300,000 on funded telecare provision for social care purposes. So it's certain that some of those people who had that service found it useful. However, there was no feedback and there was no benefit attributed to that service, that provision. So it effectively represented a net cash outflow to the council. And in my discussions with other telecare services, it's clear that many are in the same boat. Even where a telecare charge is made to users, and that's taken into account, services can struggle to demonstrate a net benefit, which makes it really challenging to make the case for investment to grow the service. So in Hampshire, we set out to track the benefits from the very beginning. In the contract year just ended, the telecare service generated a net saving in excess of £1.5 million, and this is evidence at the service user level in terms of other more costly care elements removed or avoided as a result of using telecare. This brings the total net saving from the use of telecare in Hampshire to £4.7 million over 3 years. And as the Deputy Director of Adult Services at Hampshire is fond of saying, we have a service that improves lives and costs us less than nothing. I'm going to hand over to Mark now, who, as the Council's Strategic Commissioning Manager, will take you through Hampshire's thinking on the role of TECS in social care.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Good afternoon, everybody. As Steve said, my name's Mark Allen. I'm a Commissioning Manager responsible for our partnership in Hampshire County Council. And I think the figures that Steve's shown you there are quite impressive, and I think by anyone's standards, there's something to be proud of. I know I am. And I think as sort of a result of that, you'll see that I'm actually quite an advocate for the way we've actually approached the development of technology and TECS, the delivery of TECS within the area in which I work. And that will come across in a minute. But however, numbers like that give you a very partial picture. And I think a number of people say, oh, that's great, but how does it work and what have you done and all the rest of it, those sorts of things. So really what I'm going to do now is to talk around what is really the Commissioner's perspective. And I'll start with a confession, and I won't apologise for this confession. And it's really where I was back in 2012, probably, when we started looking at these new arrangements. And it's with that hat on that I'll talk about that. And that confession is I wasn't specifically interested in technology. I wasn't interested in the latest gizmo. And I wasn't particularly interested in the cost of this widget or that widget, or prescribing anything, or having a brochure from which to choose this or that sort of thing. What I was actually really interested in is the stuff around commissioning, the services that we actually deliver for within our areas, is how they impact on people's lives and how actually they get embedded in practice in the way that our members of staff, in my case, our social work teams and the OTs and the rest of the support workers, actually deliver services, and how it can actually become part of the arsenal of services that they mobilise to actually meet people's needs and address their wants and desires. And in particular, when we were looking at new types of services and commissioning, and certainly from 2012 and even more importantly today, is how transformative those sorts of things are. How can it actually get embedded and transform social care practice, both on an individual level and systemically? And so I think at that point in 2012, we knew that TECS had a role in the future, but we didn't know what it was. And so the question was, how do we engage with this? How do we push it? And what I was interested in, what I was focusing, so the question was, what was I interested in? What did I focus on at the time? And I think really one of the things that really drove us, and those of you that have a commissioning background will sort of recognise this, and also a social work background will recognise this. Sorry, you didn't turn the page, Steve, so I'm ahead. Was this risk? It wasn't quite as big a risk as that, it says there, but in terms of actually looking at individuals and those things that impact people's lives, and when social workers are talking to people about their needs and the rest of it, often actually what they're identifying are those areas of risk that have an impact on people's lives. And the things that they put in place are things that actually mitigate or address those sorts of risks and actually help people cope on a day-to-day basis on a range of levels, ranging from very simple through to nursing care and in the NHS beyond that. And so really, my mindset was about how can we put in place things that address these risks? And actually, those risks work on multiple levels. And there are different ways that risk is perceived. There's a risk is perceived on a very individual basis. It's about me. But it's also, in terms of our social work teams, it's about how we work in with cohorts and how actually collectively as a team we deal with that. And organisationally and as an authority, we look at actually our population and say, how do we manage these risks on those sorts of levels? And in particular, it was around how do we deal with those risks that service users face on a daily basis. And as a commissioner, I need to be confident that the services we put in place and the decisions we make address those risks in the most effective ways possible. And I think really importantly is my social work colleagues feel that too. Because without those colleagues, without taking them on board, you're lost. And oddly, one of the ways we actually approached this was to lighten up a bit. Because actually, if you focus too heavily on risk, you dive down into it, and all you do is you focus on that individual risk. You don't actually think about what I'm going to talk about next, which is this, outcomes. Because actually, that's the way you start to mitigate risks. If you focus on the outcomes that are required and those services that deliver those outcomes, is you address the risk, but what you're looking at is beyond that. You're looking over the horizon, and actually that's both on an individual level for the service user. The service user outcomes are paramount in this. But it's also actually, what are those outcomes that our social work teams are looking for? What is it that on a day-to-day basis that they see is both in terms of delivering services to their customers and working with their customers and their clients and their service users about the sorts of services that they need, but also impacting on social work practice and on their casework. And then finally, and I don't think we want to underplay the level, the importance of actually addressing this, is those systemic outcomes. Is in an environment where we're increasingly under pressure financially, etc., we've got to be sure that actually the outcomes that are being delivered are both useful to the service user and actually useful to us as organisations, that they're cost effective, etc., and the rest. Hugely important. But beyond that, you have to be able to deliver this, which is benefits. And those benefits are not just about organisational benefits, and I'll come on to that, but they're also the benefits of the service users. So we deliver outcomes for service users, but there are benefits beyond that, which are about how these things impact on people's everyday lives, how people lead their lives, and it's about their life and their well-being. And it's those unseen benefits that drift beyond the immediate, so that you put something in place that addresses an immediate need, delivers an immediate outcome. But for example, the impact that we've found in terms of delivering services on carers, for example, is huge. And those are ones we don't actually take into account when we're thinking about these and identifying the benefits that somebody who's receiving technology that actually transforms their lives, the impact on their carers right across the board is massive. And when I say carers, I think about, when we've got elderly people that are talking to their grandchildren in Australia for the first time, that's impacting on those grandchildren's lives in Australia. It's hugely important. Again, social workers, in terms of social work practice, being able to actually identify the benefits there, embedding it, making it transformative, and that it clearly complements other activity. We cannot be commissioning services nowadays that are seen as standalone. They have to actually fit within the whole, what I would call, crudely probably, the arsenal of social care practice. And these things have to just fit. The days of it being over there and as an add-on are just gone. We cannot afford that anymore. And then also, and again, organisationally, we have to be able to demonstrate those benefits. And finally, for me, and I sort of will apologise for this, and I'll be a bit Tony Blair, for which I do apologise. Evidence, evidence, evidence. Different word, but the same cadence. It's critical on every level. Is unless we can actually communicate the level to all of our stakeholders that this actually delivers, again, we're not on a starting foot. We're running a losing battle, because service users and carers need to see the evidence that this thing works. We know older people will use technology, will engage with different things. You can teach old dogs new tricks if you like, to be very crude about it, but actually it's the evidence that shows this impacts on their lives. Equally, social workers, again, impacts on practice, and those systemic impacts, evidence of better efficiencies, better use of resources and organisational buy-in. All of those things needed addressing. That's where I started from. It's nothing about that. It's about technology or the use of technology. And for me, one of the things that I recognised, and then my senior colleagues recognised at the time, is actually local authorities are pretty poor at doing this sort of thing. Which is why in 2012 and then in 2013 we went actually out to find a partner to help us deliver that in partnership with us, and that's where Steve came in.
Thanks, Mark. So, as Mark's provider, we too are focused on risk. The referral form we co-designed with care practitioners asked them to identify what risk their client is exposed to, for example, falling, isolation, wandering, and so on. And there's no requirements on the care practitioner to select equipment. So we concluded that asking them to pick boxes and wires from a catalogue would either put them off making a referral in the first place or result in the client perhaps receiving a suboptimal technology solution. What care practitioners are interested in, of course, is outcomes for their vulnerable clients. They discuss and agree with the client what outcome is sought, and that goes on the referral form. Outcomes are described in clear, simple terms that emphasise the human and not the technical. For example, carry on living at home, remember to do important things, be more independent, get help when needed, stay safe. My team's job is then to install a solution that maximises the prospect of achieving those outcomes, tailored for each client in their own home environment. Mark talked about benefits, and in the past, local authorities have had enough cash to say, we hear good service user stories about telecare, so let's invest some money providing it. And we should be in no doubt that with cuts to local government budgets of 50% by the end of this Parliament, they won't for much longer be spending on telecare simply because clients like it. In Hampshire, we asked the care practitioner to state on the referral form what other more costly forms of care they're either going to remove from the package of care or avoid adding to the package of care as a consequence of providing telecare. The benefit to the client is the achievement of the care outcome. The benefit to the commissioner must be a saving. And we've worked with lots of local authority telecare services, and one pretty universal weakness is a lack of robust evidence of impact. Many telecare services charge their clients and claim this income results in a surplus. In fact, when we've taken a forensic look at service cost in some local authorities, accounting not just for the cost of kit, installation, monitoring and equipment, but also for the cost of collecting the charge and bad debt and other hidden costs, we often find that even fully self-funding services are in fact costing the council money. So hence, for us, the future is in really evidencing how the service is actively reducing other costs of care. So the average cost of a domiciliary care package is about £200 a week. So giving up a £3 or £4 charge per week to the service user for telecare, which we've done in Hampshire, there is no charge, in order to take a £30 or £40 chunk out of the dom care expenditure makes clear business sense, as long as you can make it happen consistently and evidence it robustly, which does, I admit, take time and effort. So to achieve a step change in the way care technology is used in the social care context, we were commissioned to work collaboratively with Hampshire County Council, and together we keep in mind the 2 points from the start of the session. Firstly, that technology is ubiquitous. Why would we not use it routinely with vulnerable people? And secondly, it's not about the kit. It's about addressing some human needs to be in touch, to be informed, to be safe. We then keep a focus on these 4 letters: risk, outcome, benefits, evidence. And these words mean something slightly different if you're a commissioner, a provider, a care practitioner, or a service user. But in Hampshire, what we've been able to drive, how we've been able to drive telecare into the mainstream is by ensuring that the needs of all of these stakeholders are addressed. And to conclude, too many commissioners come to market for just the commodity components of a care technology service: the equipment, the installation capacity, the monitoring centre connections, and so on. In our view, providers can't drive mainstreaming unless they're given greater scope to change referrer behaviour and transform the end-to-end system. So if there's one thing that would drive a step change in pushing care technology into the mainstream, based on our learning in Hampshire, it's if more people like Mark commissioned the right thing, by focusing on technology not as an end in itself, but as a means to drive transformation and achieve better care outcomes at lower cost. Thank you.